Okay, I guess one of the good uses of this format would be to talk about the pronunciation and writing system of Middle English, because that's one area where it is significantly different, both from Old English and from the modern English that would follow it. So today, in this short video, hopefully short, we're going to talk about spelling and pronunciation, or if English spelling is weird, blame the Norman scribes. Now, why blame Norman scribes? Well, here's the thing, right? In Old English, the writing system was invented by English speakers to write down English, and they used the Latin alphabet. They adapted that Roman alphabet. But over in France, they had adapted the Latin alphabet too, but they had not necessarily adapted it in the same way. So they already associated particular sounds. For example, C, which we'll discuss, with a different set of sounds than the set of sounds it was associated with in English. And so they had to cut, but they also, the Normans, encountered sounds in English that they didn't have in French, and so they had to come up with new ways of writing those sometimes, because the ways that were used for English already had a different sound in French. For example, we also have this letter here called the yogh, Y-O-G-H, which is pronounced either y in the front of a word or a g, a voiced velar fricative, or sometimes a voiceless velar fricative in the back of a word and at the end of a syllable. So we have the Old English letters eth and thorn. These survive. They did not exist in the Norman alphabet, and they were gradually phased out and replaced with th. The letter yo was generally replaced with a G, or sometimes with a GH, as in ghost or night, but sometimes by Y. This would have been rost or nicht in the Middle Ages, right, because it's a velar fricative. The Norman qua, QU, largely substituted for the Anglo-Saxon CW, so that quena in Old English becomes quain, and quick becomes quick. The sh sound, previously rendered in West Saxon as sh, as in ship, is changed to be written as sh or sch. So ship becomes ship, and this is because sc was already used to render just the s sound, just that voiceless alveolar fricative in French. The initial letters hua generally became hua, which were pronounced pretty much the same for a long time. You pronounce that H in Middle English as in when, where. There's certain kinds of old Southern accents here in the United States where they still do that ho, hui, you know? A C was often but not always replaced by a K. Kuning or kung becomes king, or a CK. Book becomes book, and later book. Or sometimes CH. Child becomes child, chese becomes cheese. Let's see, what else? The Old English H at the start of words like hring and hneka was deleted, and this might reflect a change in the pronunciation as well. And sometimes we get an H added to the start of many Romance loanwords, such as honor, heir, honest, habit, herb. But was sometimes pronounced and sometimes not, and this is still something that is differs. In Britain, of course, they say herb rather than herb, which we say here. F and V began to be differentiated. They were kind of the same letter in Old English, as did S and Z, and N and N. V and U remain largely interchangeable, although V was often used at the start of a word and U in the middle, have. So you have to sort of realize that it's the same letter. Sometimes it's used as a consonant and sometimes as a vowel. Quite the opposite of today, because the written U was similar to V, N, and M. It was replaced in many words with an O. So sun, cum, ruv, un, this was all U's in Old English, but it gets replaced by O's in Middle English, in part just because the way, all of these letters would be written with simple up and down strokes called minims, and so you had too many minims in a row, it was hard to make out what the word was saying. What else? The OU spelling of words like house and mouse was introduced introduced. Would have been just an O before. And many long vowels were marked by a double letter. Book, becomes book. Remember vowel quantity, long and short vowels? Well, this gets indicated in the writing system now. Say becomes say, or in some cases, some areas, some scribes, instead of doubling the letter, use a trailing E instead to indicate that there is a long vowel. So that, nos becomes nose. That E at the end indicates that this is a long O. And we still use both methods in modern English. This is one of the reasons English spelling is so weird is because there were all these different spelling innovations that were introduced in different places, and the standard English writing ended up adopting some from each and not really sort of being systematic about it. The long A vowel of Old English becomes more like O in Middle English, so that hom became home, stone became stone, bon became bone, etc. And short vowels were identified sometimes by consonant doubling. So sitting, we know that this is not sighting, but sitting because we use a double consonant after it. And so, but there was no uniform spelling. There were no rules. It was just right. No, that's the Outback. And so we don't get sort of standardized spelling until the 18th century. And at that point, English spelling is such a hodgepodge of different systems, innovations, and reforms that took place over the years, which is why English spelling isn't completely random. It's just that there's like 6 or 7 different rules for everything that all might be operating at any particular time, and you can't really predict which gets used for what kind of words. And so this is why there's 5 different ways to spell the same thing, but why there's at least only 5 different ways to spell the same thing. The word nicht, this is how you would have pronounced that, might in the Middle Ages. You might see it spelled in the Middle Ages macht, machte, michte, michte, mist, mitha, motha, michte, mischt. Wow. So that's a lot of different ways of spelling the same word, which makes Middle English both fun and challenging. Now, one reason is there was no uniform spelling is something that we alluded to a little bit in the last video, and we'll talk about more in the next, which was that there were a lot more regional variation. There was a lot more differences between the dialects of different dialects of English, to the extent that the poet and monk John Lydgate, writing in the 1430, wrote, "Our language is also so diverse in itself that the common manner of speaking in English of some country can scant be understanded in some other country of the same land." Now, I kind of did that in somewhat modern pronunciation so you could understand that. And in the next video, we're going to talk about those diverse pronunciations and forms and how we know what the different dialects of English were. And it has to do with scribal differences. So tune in for part 5 of our Middle English series.